From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Elon Musk says he'll buy Twitter after all, as the Supreme Court takes a case over whether social media companies are liable for content recommended by their algorithms. Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We are joined today by my colleagues, columnists Alicia Finley and Kim Strassel. Happy Wednesday to you both. In April, Elon Musk agreed to buy Twitter for about $44 billion, but then he tried to walk away as the stock market retreated, setting up a clash in Delaware court, including a trial that was supposed to begin in only 2 weeks. But on Monday, Musk sent Twitter a letter saying that he now intends to proceed to the closing of the transaction pending the financing that he's depending on, and provided that the Delaware court adjourns the trial that is scheduled later this month. So, Alicia, as best as we can tell here, trying to read the mind of a mercurial figure like Elon Musk, do you think he had a change of heart here on Twitter, maybe a second or third change of heart now it is? Or do you think he just saw the legal writing on the wall?
Well, I think our columnist Holman Jenkins argues that it looks like he was going to lose the case. And I kind of agree just from the news reports, especially because he had waived his due process or his rights to kind of actually do an in-deep dive of Twitter's, bots and all of that when he agreed to buy the company. So I think it's more of a matter of he realized he was going to lose. He didn't want to lose, and so now he's kind of, putting the onus back on Twitter. Do they really want to sell the company to a guy who doesn't really want to own it? Now, the Twitter shareholders, overwhelmingly, I think 98 or 99% approved the deal last month. And obviously this is a $50 per share. So that comes out as a big premium over where Twitter stock was selling, just a couple weeks ago. So financially, it does seem to be in Twitter's best interest. But now Twitter does still have to decide whether it really is in the company's best interest to be operated or owned by a man who doesn't want to own it.
But if the transaction is on again, that puts back on the table the question of what exactly Musk intends to do as the owner of Twitter. And to me, that's still pretty unclear. So let's start with a clip of Musk explaining himself earlier this year at a Twitter town hall.
I think an important goal for Twitter would be to try to include as much of the country, as much of the world as possible. So currently, it's a relatively small percentage of the world that is, it is a small percentage of the world that is on Twitter. If you say like daily active users, if you assume that that's say 200 million, you've got 8 billion people on Earth. That's 7.8 billion who are not on Twitter. So that's a pretty big number. And really, I think you want as much of the world as possible on Twitter. You want to be as inclusive as possible, the broadest demographic. And for that to happen, people must like being on Twitter. So if they're being harassed or if they're uncomfortable, they're just not going to use Twitter.
And to me, Kim, that seems to contrast, I think, with some of his other rhetoric talking about wanting to make Twitter an inclusive arena for free speech, which suggests a willingness to let people feel uncomfortable sometimes with what they're seeing. And as if to not clear this up, here's what Elon Musk tweeted on Tuesday, quote, "Buying Twitter is an accelerant to creating X, the everything app," unquote. So, Kim, I don't know if you have an Elon Musk translator handy, but not clear to me exactly what he means by that.
I can't even pronounce his children's names, so no. But I would divide this into two categories. I think one of the immediate questions, the more pressing one, is a financial one for a couple of reasons. I actually had a little bit of sympathy with Musk's demands from Twitter that they allow him to verify how many accounts are actually bots or fake, because it gets to the bottom line. Advertisers want to give money for ads for real people who are actually reading them. And if Musk gets in there, restructures this, say, as a private company and does more to get rid of those bots, it could dramatically reduce the number of actual users. Now, as Alicia said, I think there's a real legal question as whether or not he didn't waive those rights. So I guess more fool him. And this is why he's giving it up on the lawsuit. But he's going to have to take some immediate steps to deal with that. And he also, I would just note that in the time period since he announced this deal, we've seen, because of recessionary pressures, a huge meltdown in the online advertising market. I think Google and Facebook and Snapchat, by some estimates, have had a 34% decline since the Twitter deal was announced. So there's going to be some immediate financial things he simply has to deal with. I think what you're referencing is more the kind of broad mission of Twitter, and he certainly has some big changes in mind. I agree that he's been a little bit all over the map in terms of how you put that into motion. He's been very vocal about the fact that he feels Twitter does too much censorship and viewpoint discrimination. But in order to get rid of that, you potentially open it up to a lot more voices that could be a little hostile and make people feel, as you said, uncomfortable. So we'll have to see how he does it. He's also had some discussions and ideas about ways to simply restructure the Twitter experience. Overall, he's got some pretty lofty goals. He said, and this goes to his clip, that he'd like to have over 1 billion users on Twitter in 5 to 10 years. That's very ambitious, and I don't think it's likely to happen without some major structural changes.
But maybe that's part of the advantage of this kind of experiment is it allows some other approaches to social media to be tried. I mean, one of the biggest criticisms, I think, and it's I think a valid one of these social media companies is there's a groupthink issue. All of them are generally based, in and around Silicon Valley. And so you think about something like the Twitter blackout on the Hunter Biden story, and I find myself wondering, I mean, who in the room thought that was a good idea? And was there nobody who said, maybe we should take a pause here and think about how this will be received by users who are not living in Silicon Valley? And so, Alicia, I mean, it will be interesting to see what Elon Musk eventually does. And it seems like, as Kim says, he's been all over the map, but I don't mind a little bit of trying out different approaches. And maybe part of it is just to break the groupthink. I mean, Elon Musk has taken some of his companies, SpaceX, out of California and moved it to Texas. Maybe it would be interesting to see what the dynamic on Twitter was like if Twitter had a Texas headquarters instead of a San Francisco headquarters.
So, I mean, they do have offices around the country, and I think Twitter, a lot of the workers have been working remotely, so it's actually going to be interesting if Elon is going to force them all back into the office, as he has threatened to do. There probably are some benefits in terms of collaboration, and actually, I wouldn't say groupthink, but, people do generate ideas when talking with others, and others with different perspectives. And to your point, one of the problems is with Twitter and a lot of these social media companies is they're overwhelmingly employ a lot of, young liberal yuppies. I mean, that's not just, in the Bay Area, that's also, New York, Austin, these places. I think Twitter actually has been trying to innovate. They've been experimenting with charging people for authentication, as well as been looking at maybe doing a subscription model. The problem is that the ad market actually in general for these companies is really undergoing a lot of disruption. And you're seeing that again across the board where their ad revenues are falling, in part because advertisers are realizing they're not really getting the bang for their buck by advertising on these platforms. And Twitter has been hit more than, Google's YouTube and some others. But they're going to have to figure out how to keep these advertisers on their platform and probably provide some more value added there. It's not just, one way obviously is to grow your user base to, as Musk has aspired to 1 billion users. But another way, again, is to try to monetize these users through a different way, because the advertising is probably in the long term is not going to be a sustainable model.
But I guess one thing that would be interesting to see is whether whatever Musk does and experiments with here with Twitter, whether it eases some of the pressure in Washington to regulate social media, which is coming from the left and also coming from the right. Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri had a bill that would require big internet sites to get a certificate from the Federal Trade Commission, and they would have to prove every 2 years that they don't moderate content. Here's a quote from the bill: "in a manner that is biased against a political party, political candidate, or political viewpoint," unquote. And Kim, to my mind, that is the exact wrong approach, having some federal bureaucracy in Washington giving out licenses to internet sites. And with any luck, Elon Musk and a little bit of the changing of dynamics in some of these social sites might lift some of that pressure from Washington.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know that it will entirely lift it because big tech has now become everybody's favorite whipping boy, and they have done a remarkable job, Silicon Valley has, of really infuriating people across the entire political spectrum on the left and the right. And so that, for instance, is why you saw a push this summer from Chuck Grassley in the Senate, who's a Republican, but Amy Klobuchar, a Minnesota Democrat, to put together an antitrust bill that really targeted big tech companies. That seems not to be going anywhere. And I think that that's probably what big tech has going for it at the moment, at least from Congress, is that they've had so many other priorities and there's still so many areas of disagreement. It seems hard to see where they could maybe come together on legislation that could make it over the line. I think the bigger, more immediate question are regulators. And there are certainly a number of people in the Biden administration in different commissions, whether the FTC or other groups that really are looking to go after big tech and make their life tough from a regulatory perspective. Given that these are Democrats in control, I'm not sure Elon Musk is going to escape their targeting if he is going to take actions that might seem to be more free speech oriented in ways that conservatives have demanded. So I'm not necessarily sure this makes any of the political headaches go away for these groups, but it does. I agree with you, Kyle. I think that there could be a potential for a real change in models that would, maybe at least prove or demonstrate that competition is often a better way of handling these than heavy-footed regulations or more layered laws.